Okay, so you want to own a dairy farm. Buy some land, get a few cows, sell the milk, and watch the money roll in every single morning like clockwork. Sounds almost too simple, right? America runs on dairy. Cheese, butter, yogurt, ice cream. It's a $252 billion industry in this country alone. And somewhere at the very beginning of all of it, there's a cow standing in a barn at 4 in the morning being milked by someone who hasn't slept properly since 2019. Here's the thing nobody tells you before you fall in love with the idea of owning a dairy farm. The product is real. The demand is real. The revenue is real. But so are the costs, and they don't stop. Not on weekends. Not on holidays. Not when milk prices crash. Not when your equipment breaks at midnight. Not ever. A dairy farm is not a business you can walk away from for a day. It is a living machine that requires feeding, managing, and constant attention 365 days a year, and it will test you financially in ways that most other businesses simply do not. So before you write a single check, let's walk through what this actually costs, how you actually make money, where the money disappears to, and whether the whole thing is even worth it. And we're going to do it with real numbers pulled from real USDA data, university extension research, and actual market prices. Because the dairy industry is one of the most thoroughly measured agricultural sectors in the country, and the numbers are genuinely fascinating. Let's start with the land, because without land you have nothing. Dairy farms in the United States need pasture for grazing, fields for growing feed crops, and enough space to build barns, milking facilities, and waste management systems. The average commercial dairy operation in the Midwest, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, runs somewhere between 200 and 600 acres. Farmland in those states currently runs between $5,000 and $10,000 per acre in most counties. That means just the land alone, before a single nail is hammered or a single cow is purchased, can cost anywhere between $1 million and $6 million depending on where you are and how many acres you need. If you're looking at dairy land in the Northeast, New York, Vermont, Pennsylvania, prices climb even higher in many areas because of smaller available parcels and higher overall land values. California's Central Valley, which is still one of the top milk-producing regions in the country, has seen farmland prices go well above $10,000 per acre in prime areas. So right out of the gate, before anything else happens, you are looking at a land purchase that in most realistic scenarios costs you multiple millions of dollars. And that's just the dirt. Now you need something to put on that dirt. A standard commercial dairy barn for a herd of around 250 cows, which is considered a modest commercial operation today, costs somewhere between $2,500 and $3,000 per stall to build, according to University of Wisconsin extension data. Multiply that by 250 stalls, and you're looking at $600,000 to $750,000 just for the barn structure, before electrical, plumbing, ventilation, or any specialized equipment is installed. Add a proper milking parlor and the numbers get serious fast. A new parlor with the buildings and equipment to handle a herd of that size runs between $24,000 and $32,000 per milking stall. A 10-stall milking parlor, the kind that can efficiently handle a 250 cow herd, is therefore roughly $250,000 to $320,000 on its own. If you want to go the robotic milking route, which more farms are doing because it reduces labor dependency and allows cows to milk themselves on their own schedule, the cost jumps to $12,000 to $13,000 per stall, including the robotic unit, the gates, the building integration, and manure storage. A 250 cow operation with robotic milking is therefore a $3 million infrastructure investment in the milking system alone. Then there are the cows themselves. This is where a lot of people genuinely underestimate the cost because they picture buying a cow once and milking it forever. That is not how this works. A dairy cow's productive life in a high-output commercial herd is typically 3 to 5 years before she is retired or sold. She must calve, give birth, roughly once a year to keep producing milk, because milk production is driven by the hormonal cycle of pregnancy and birth. She will likely calve 3 to 4 times in her commercial life, and then she'll be sold for beef, which returns some value but nowhere near what you paid for her. Replacing animals in your herd is a continuous, ongoing cost of doing business. As of early 2026, the average price for a replacement dairy cow sold for herd purposes in the United States reached $3,130 per head, according to the USDA. In major dairy states like Michigan and Wisconsin, prices were running even higher at $3,300 to $3,360 per animal. So a starting herd of 250 cows costs you somewhere between $780,000 and $830,000, and that's before you account for the fact that replacement heifers, the younger animals not yet milking, Run an additional $3,500 to $4,400 each at top Wisconsin and Minnesota barns, according to current auction data. Add it all up. Land at $2 million for a mid-range parcel. Barn construction at $700,000. A milking parlor at $250,000. Cows at $800,000. Tractors, feed storage equipment, silage choppers, trucks, and general farm machinery at another $300,000 to $500,000. Manure storage and handling systems, which environmental regulations in most states require, at another $100,000 to $200,000. A working capital reserve to cover the first 6 to 12 months of feed and operating costs before milk checks stabilize, at around $200,000. You are now looking at a startup investment of somewhere between $4 million and $5 million for a modest 250-cow commercial dairy farm. That's before you've hired a single employee, registered for your milk permit, passed your first Grade A dairy inspection, or produced a single pound of milk. Now let's talk about how you actually make money. The core revenue mechanism in dairy is something called the milk price, quoted in dollars per 100 pounds of milk produced. The industry term for 100 pounds of milk is a hundredweight, abbreviated as CWT. 100 weight is roughly 11.5 gallons of milk. In 2024, the average net price received by U.S. dairy producers was $21.63 per hundredweight of milk. That is the check the farmer gets after their cooperative or processor takes their cut. A healthy Holstein dairy cow in a well-managed commercial herd produces somewhere around 23,000 to 25,000 pounds of milk per year. At an average price of $21.63 per hundredweight, one cow generates roughly $5,000 in annual milk revenue. Multiply that by 250 cows, and your 250 cow dairy is bringing in $1,250,000 in gross annual milk revenue. That sounds like a real business, and it is. But now let's talk about what it costs to produce that milk, because this is where the reality of dairy economics becomes deeply uncomfortable. Feed is the single biggest cost on any dairy farm. Dairy cows eat constantly hay, corn silage, protein supplements, minerals, and a large Holstein cow consumes roughly 55 pounds of dry feed matter per day. University of Illinois Farm Business Management data from 2024 put feed costs at $11.64 per hundredweight of milk produced. That means on a farm generating 23,000 pounds of milk per cow per year, feed alone costs roughly $2,675 per cow annually. Multiply that by 250 cows, and feed costs alone run approximately $668,000 per year. That is more than half your total milk revenue. Already gone, then comes labor. Dairy cows must be milked 2 to 3 times per day, every day without exception. They must be fed, their stalls must be cleaned, their health must be monitored, calves must be cared for, and the entire operation must be managed constantly. On a 250 cow operation, you realistically need 3 to 5 full-time employees. Dairy farm workers earn between $15 and $22 per hour in most markets, and when you factor in benefits, payroll taxes, and the overtime that comes with weekend and holiday coverage, a realistic labor bill for a farm this size runs between $140,000 and $200,000 annually. Veterinary care is not optional on a dairy farm. It is a daily operating reality. Cows get mastitis, which is an infection of the udder. They get lameness. They have difficult calvings. They need reproductive management and regular herd health checks. Budget between $100 and $200 per cow per year for vet costs, medications, and reproductive services. On 250 cows, that's $25,000 to $50,000 per year. Equipment maintenance, fuel, and repairs on a working dairy farm run between $40,000 and $80,000 annually on a modest operation. Your tractor breaks, your milking system needs servicing, your manure spreader needs a new part. These things happen continuously. Insurance, covering the herd, the property, the equipment, and general liability, runs another $20,000 to $40,000 per year depending on coverage levels and location. Property taxes on the land add another $15,000 to $30,000 annually in most Midwest states, though many states offer agricultural property tax relief programs that reduce this somewhat. Bedding for the cows, sawdust, sand, or recycled manure solids costs another $15,000 to $30,000 per year for a herd of this size. Milk hauling fees, charged by the cooperative or processor to pick up your milk, typically run between $1 and $1.50 per hundredweight on top of the farm gate price. Electricity to run the milking system, cooling tanks, barn lighting, ventilation fans, and other equipment costs between $30,000 and $60,000 annually. Here is where the numbers get painful. Add it all up. feed at $668,000, labor at $170,000, vet at $35,000, equipment repairs at $60,000, insurance and taxes at $50,000, bedding and miscellaneous supplies at $40,000, electricity at $45,000, milk hauling at $40,000. Total operating costs, approximately $1,108,000 per year. Revenue from milk, $1,250,000. Net operating profit before debt service, roughly $140,000. Now remember, you borrowed $4 to $5 million to build this farm. At current agricultural loan interest rates of around 6 to 7% on a 25-year term, annual debt service on a $4.5 million loan runs approximately $360,000 to $400,000 per year. That $140,000 in operating profit doesn't even come close to covering your debt payment. You are losing $200,000 to $260,000 per year. This is not a hypothetical. This is what the University of Illinois Farm Business Farm Management Association actually found when tracking real dairy farms across Illinois in 2024.